Yeah, I think concerns around, immunity and health, around cooking from home, right? I think we've all been eating out quite a bit, and we're realizing now that there's something great about cooking for your family and sitting down and having a shared meal and supporting our, where possible, our local suppliers, farms, etc. And that actually cooking from home is a great act of sustainability as well. And so that's certainly a behavior that I expect. Even though we're all very much looking forward to being able to go out for dinner right now, I think behaviors around home cooking, around health and wellness, etc., will stick. I think no one has a crystal ball, of course, but I think what we're expecting is that there'll just be more focus on what's real, and real functional benefits and real clinical efficacy. I think some of health and wellness got to a point where, um, not to say that false claims were being made, but sort of certain benefits were being implied without sort of having the science to really back it up. And I think we'll see a little bit more focus on that. I think partly for economic reasons, right? If you're spending your money buying, again, to use the extreme example, an immunity product, right? Whether that's in a food or a beverage or in a supplement, you're going to want to make sure you get value for your money, and you're going to want to make sure that it actually works. So part of it is for economic reasons, and part is because I think consumers are more focused on getting those real functional benefits. So whether if it's a disinfecting spray for your countertop in the kitchen, if that's a green and ecologically responsible brand, you're still going to want to make sure that it works. And so I think there'll be more focus on that. I think that's one that I find particularly challenging. I think certainly until we're out of that um, that sort of next 24-month phase, until there is a vaccine and or a cure, I think unfortunately that is going to be challenged. And I say that because you'll seeing coffee shops that had offered the ability to bring in your own cups, to reuse those. Those programs have obviously been canceled now. I think people, again, if you look at sort of the needs hierarchy, people are just more focused on sort of feeding their families and keeping them healthy, as opposed to whether or not the containers that food or those cleaning products arrive in are recyclable. So unfortunately, if you look at recycling rates in the country nationally, they were already relatively low, and they're obviously lower now. But even some of the interesting products around where you can reuse packaging, obviously that's just not feasible today, and that's understandable. So I'm very hopeful that in the next, that will all come back, right? I don't think that 5 years from now, we're going to say to each other, you know what, actually, it's fine to dump our plastic bottles in the ocean. Let's go back to that, right? I expect that in the next, that trend will continue and accelerate. But unfortunately, I think in the short term, it's taking a bit of a step back. Yeah. I mean, I'm personally kind of excited about that phase. I think, it's hard to say now when so many people are suffering and people have been so negatively impacted economically. But there is something exciting about a rebirth, just like after 08, 09, or even, I live in New York City, and after September 11th, the city and the economy sort of has a way to reinvent itself rather, after such a period of crisis, and new creativity and new entrepreneurs emerge. It's a bit of a resetting. It gives the opportunity for new businesses to start, taking advantage of whatever the latest sort of consumer trends are. And I'm excited to see what is coming next, what that will look like. I think in any event, what we do know is that the world will be more omnichannel in the CPG world. So if you look nationally, pre-COVID, maybe depending a little bit on how you measure it, but the low single-digit percentage points of food and beverage, for example, were sold online in America. In places like New York, that was already 15-20%, because we have Amazon Fresh here, and Food Kick, and we have Peapod, etc. But I think you'll see those numbers nationally be a lot closer to what New York was pre-COVID. And also how we discover brands, right? We talked a little bit about how hard it is to discover brands online, but I think in that new world, brands will be more likely to be discovered on Instagram than on a billboard or a TV ad, or certainly sort of a sampling station inside a store. I think you're definitely seeing consumer brands think much more about how they can take advantage of that new online world, whether that means having packaging that is perhaps more friendly to being shipped direct to consumer, right? If you're in a, making it up, like a heavy glass container that maybe has great shelf presence in a grocery store, that's probably not ideal to ship.
Mhm.
So thinking about different packaging options, thinking through, your community online and how best to monetize that community by not just building awareness online, but also actually selling them products. What's the role of e-commerce versus your own D2C, right? You might be looking at online grocers or marketplaces, but what role, what margin profile will be associated with that? What do you want the role of your own D2C to be? How will that interact with what's happening in the physical world, right? Is it going to be the same SKU set at the same prices, or are there going to be dedicated SKUs? So thinking through sort of how those channels interact, I think is important.